we offered to talk about, using the terminology we chose, dumb things spiritual people say. And some people would actually take offense to that because they have no sense of humor. We've got to lighten up. We really do. We have to lighten up and not get so intent about our spirituality. Take your spirituality seriously. Certainly be on the path, be committed, have conviction, all of that. But not overly serious to where everything's so uptight, where our spirituality starts to create tensions in us rather than expansiveness. Look at me, I'm spiritual, isn't the same as, wow, this is the doing and this is the being. And one way to do that is laugh at some of these things that people teach and so on. But it's very important to understand that it's kind of like there are truths and there are truths. People spout truths as though they know something spiritual. They hear something and it sounds kind of catchy. And especially if a lot of people start reciting it because we go, well, if everybody's reciting it, it must be true. I'm the type that's always noticed going, but it's only true if it's true. It's not always true just because people say it. And what's really a sad thing to me is in today's spirituality, even the teachers catch on to those things and recite them as though they're truths. The teachers don't say, actually, that's not true. Here's the truth to that. So one of them that the folks brought up, and I'll share some that the folks brought up, here, and other ones that are kind of just common, but it's all good. So we hear it's all good. Lots of people say it. I see, people into health say it, Buddhists say it, spiritual New Agers say it. It just becomes this really common thing. And many of us in this room have probably said most of the things I'm going to comment on. So don't take it as a criticism. Rather, think of it as, whoa, there's another way of looking at that comment. Because, it's all good. But in fact, only God is good. And that sounds really religious and preachy, but what I mean is only love is good. If I'm treating you unlovingly, I'm not expecting you to walk away going, well, it's all good. I kicked you in the leg. Oh, thank you. It's all good. You don't have to pretend something that's painful is good just because someone says that's a good saying. It's all good. No, wait. If something is fear-based, it's not good-based because it's not God-based. And only God is good, only God is real, and God is love. So only love is good. It's all good only means what? It's all good. Look at the world. How many of the people that walk around going, it's all good, will accept that saying when it comes to politics today? Do you hear people going, oh, it's all good? Yeah, I don't really agree with the guy in office, but it's all good. No, because the hypocritical behaviors. It's things, they say these things, but only when it's convenient. The truth is, it's all good doesn't mean what I think I see is good. I'm allowed to go, man, this is messed up. If you're going to say it's all good, say it because you understand what it means. What is all good? The garbage? No. That beneath it, there is something I cannot see, and that's what's good. It's all good means there's somewhere here there is God/good. Even if I can't see it. So don't proclaim the harm is good. Claim that which I cannot see, even beneath the harms, is what's good, and that's God. Does that make sense? All right. There's one where people, someone annoys you, and somebody will say to you, well, you must have the same issue. That's not exactly true, but that's a very common thing. I don't know why I don't like my boss. Well, they're probably just reflecting things to you. Well, they're a psychopath. Well, you must be a latent psychopath. The reason we say, well, they're probably just reflecting that in you. No. The law of mirroring is a fact, but mirroring is not always literal. So just because I say, I don't like that person's clothes doesn't mean I don't dress well. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But don't take it literally. Just because somebody seems really hurtful and aggressive and you say, I don't like them. Somebody says to you, well, they're mirroring you, probably a hurtful, aggressive person too. And you go, really? And you start to take it on like, gosh, I thought I was a decent person. Now you carry more guilt than when you started the conversation. It's not true what they said. What's true is they're probably mirroring, could be something literal. They're impatient, and I hate that. Oh, maybe I have tendencies towards impatience, right? So there's mirroring. But mirroring is not always literal. Sometimes it's not what they're looking like, it's what they're bringing up in me. That's the lesson. So don't assume that every impatient person is mirroring your impatience. Don't assume every addict is mirroring that you're a latent addict. What does that addict bring up in you? That's what is your lesson. Not the literal message, the symbolic one inside. Does that one make sense? Okay. Another one, kind of playing off those first two. And this one's kind of lame. They're all lame to me. But this one, when people say, gosh, I just went through a lot of stuff, a lot of horrible things just happened to me, and someone's always going to show up and go, well, you probably need to just give thanks for that terrible experience. You don't ever give thanks for horrible behaviors or experiences. Do not give thanks for abuses as a child, and do not give thanks for Auschwitz, and do not give thanks for racism, ever. Give thanks only for what you learn from it. And I'm not even telling you what to learn, because nobody knows but you. You figure out what Viktor Frankl, I've quoted many times, says what he tells the world what he learned from Auschwitz. That is what you give thanks for. What you had the wherewithal spiritually to get out of something. So you're giving thanks, you notice that? You're giving thanks for something good, powerful, real, and godlike. That you extracted value out of something. Don't give thanks for the harmful thing itself. And again, a lot of the things I'm sharing here, these are things that it seems like spiritual people are telling you to say. Or they're just telling you these things. But they're not accurate. But that's typical, because even so-called spiritual people are still at a shallow level of spirituality. So they throw these things out there without even knowing what they're saying. So when people say things like, oh, well, just let it go. Man, let them go. Just let it go. You know what? That's not what I needed to hear right now. What I needed to hear right now sometimes is, I'm sorry to hear that. That's what you need to hear. Let it go means, now you have these spiritual people. Oh man, you just need to let it go. It's in the past, just move on. Well, the truth is, I cannot let it go, especially when it's fresh to a person. So when you tell somebody to let it go, what it really means is, I'm overwhelmed by the information you're telling me and I have no clue on how to deal with it. So why don't you let it go? Then it's easier on me. A lot of these sayings are selfish. And I don't mean that hatefully or hurtfully. They're selfish, meaning they're coming from people's broken selves, shallow selves, and they don't know what to do. So when someone tells you just get over it, it means I have no clue what to do with this, so I'm going to recite something I've heard before. Just get over it. And along those same lines, people will say, I guess I needed to go through that. So these few are kind of connected. I guess I had to go through that. And again, I know these are things you probably have said, but I needed to go through that is where you also hear, well, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be who I am today. Actually, you'd be much better off. I have faith in that. See, when you do affirmations, do you affirm that people, oh, Father, Mother, God, we're affirming that as this person launches into a new life, starting a new this year, we're affirming that all kinds of wonderfully horrible things are going to happen, and they will not be what they would have been, without going through these things. They need these things. You would never affirm that for somebody, because it's not true. The truth is, we can learn the easy way. I'm not saying to curse the hard way, but when it's happened once again, what are you learning from it? But don't say, I had to go through that. Never say that. And don't let other people say it if you can help them change their mind around it. When someone says, I guess I needed to go through that. No, you didn't. But you chose to, on some level. Or instead of chose to, but you did. So let's go from there. But if you say I had to, that means the hand of God is involved saying, listen, I do kind of like you, but I'm just not in the mood for good things to happen for you today. So I'm going to just send you into life and good luck with it. It doesn't happen that way. God is only love. All right? That's it. God is only love. When we experience non-loving things, we're experiencing non-God things. And you don't need to affirm that you needed to experience a non-God thing. You chose to, or you did experience it, but don't say had to. That implies there's a path or a law, even karma. Even if you say, I guess I needed to go through this, it was my karma. Even karma is a choice, believe it or not. On that same note, because these are kind of connected, somebody will say, well, without having challenges, this is the common one, I guess we have to have conflict in the world and hate, because I can barely even say this one, but they'll say, without conflict and hate, we wouldn't appreciate peace and love. And I just think, oh man, how can you miss this? How do you recite these things and not get it? And I understand there's popular books that are written that people buy, and they buy them because it wipes the brow with, thank God. Now I don't have to think bigger and further to understand this. Again, you don't have to experience conflict to appreciate peace. You can just appreciate peace. So when you say, I guess I had to go through such and such, no, you didn't. I guess we have to have war or we wouldn't appreciate peace. How can you even exist thinking like that? How do you survive day to day thinking that God wants this? I mean, there's books that have been written. God is not just love. God is also war. God is not just, love. God is hate. God is anger. And people are going, oh, that makes so much sense. I'm like, you're kidding me. How can that make sense? But I do understand it. Even though there's that part of me that becomes like, oh, you're kidding me. There's also a part that understands it. It's very nice for people to have stories like that so they don't have to think any deeper than that. Use your head, man, in a good way. Use your mind. Use your consciousness. Use your heart. There is God and it is only good. We don't have to say, well, for there to be a God and God is everything, God must be peace and war. Oh, that made sense. If God is everything and you have peace and war, God must be peace and war. That's so logical. Course in Miracles tells you the ego is always logical, just never rational. So that makes sense. If God is everything, I mean, if you told a 5-year-old that, they would go, that makes sense. If God is everything, God must be this and that, right? They would go, yeah, that makes sense. It isn't true. But that's all we can muster up, because we don't understand that when we say God is everything, it actually means God is everything that truly exists, which is love. Non-love doesn't truly exist. So now you don't have to make an excuse that God is also hurtful things, because those are not real things. Those are man-made, made up, and they are illusions that will one day fade. Nothing of God will ever fade. I hope that made sense. Another one, I think one of you blurted this out, but I can't remember. I'm over it. Man, I'm over it is a common saying for people that are not over anything. I think it's safer to say, I actually feel like I'm over it. I'm affirming that I'm over it. I'm intending that I'm over it. But I'm open that if something comes around for further lessons, I'm here. Does that make sense? The reason you do that is because it disarms the ego in that sense. So if I say I'm over it, and with all the sessions I do year round, I can't tell you how many people came into a session, stuff came up, and they felt worse for a moment that stuff that they thought they were over came up. The best thing for them then is to have a moment to go, okay, I don't want them to guilt themselves. I thought I was over it. And they say that. I thought I was over that. Well, apparently you're not. It's here, isn't it? But rather than try to be intent that you're over it, which means I want to be over it, which means it still has a charge. When you really are over it, not only do you not feel a charge, you actually feel a tranquility despite it. It's kind of weird. You can have old memories come up, and not only does it not have a charge, there's almost a peacefulness to it because you have deepened your understanding about the whole experience. You don't say, well, I guess I needed that experience. No, we covered that. But you also don't, I'm over it. Don't know you might be, but be open to work something if it comes up. Why? Because the ego wants you just as much to not be over it as to think you're over it. Because it'll bring something up, trigger you, and upset you again. So it's better to just get, you know what? I'm a master on earth. So yes, it's my intent. I've worked it. Pretty cool. Feel pretty clean about it. But if it comes up, I'll work it again. The ego doesn't know what to do with people like that. Because it means I'm not attached to any of it. I set my intention to be healed, to be open, to be, beyond something. But if something comes up, I'm still here and I'll still work on it. That's a healthy attitude. I hope that one makes sense. Along those lines, people will say to you when you've been hurt, well, your parents did the best they could. That's not true, unless it is true. Hear what I just said? It's not true unless it is true. Your parents don't always do the best they can. I can say I was a good parent to my kids. I really did. But did I do the absolute best I could? I'm sure there were a couple selfish moments there. Did they always do the best they could? If they harmed you, if they overtly hurt you or neglected you, I don't believe that was the best they could. That was the best they chose, but I don't believe it was the best they could. Because in each of us, there's a mind, a conscience that says, maybe I should do that and then not choose it. If I let my behaviors or my addictions win out over my children, I'm not actually doing the best I can. The best I can would be to go to a 12-step group and improve myself and then bring the best I can to the children. Is that making sense? So don't just sweep everything under the rug with these kinds of comments, One of them that you guys brought up, why did you create that? Man, why did you create that? Okay. First of all, we do co-create our lives. We do know that. We do co-create our reality. But it's one of the most insensitive things you can say to a person who's suffering. So don't. Say, I'm sorry to hear that. Say, how are you feeling? Say, what else is happening for you? Is there anything I can do? See, that is how can I help attitude. You think you're helping them by saying, why did you create that? But once again, you don't know what else to say, so you're saying something ridiculous. And it doesn't help. It's insensitive. Now, if I'm working with you, I would want to talk about what's happening, comfort you, gradually work you into maybe looking at deeper levels of some of the lessons involved, or why it happened, or why it came up. But I wouldn't use the words, why did you create that? I remember Swami Beyondananda, kind of a new age comedian. I remember him at this conference and he said, oh, I don't know if any of you have been to Sedona, a lot of people heard of Sedona, so they were like, oh, love Sedona. He goes, I don't know if you've heard, but there's kind of some new age crime happening in Sedona. People are like, what? He goes, yeah. Like people will run by and nab your purse and run with it like they do in any city. People are like, really? He goes, yeah, except when they're done, they run away and go, why did you create that? Anyway. Another common saying, I need to be heard, or I need to be seen. I've covered that in various talks before. But be careful, because when there's a part of you that needs anything, including to be seen or heard, that's usually not the God part. I'm not saying that it's not a bummer, because if you say, God, Michael, I need some help, I need some counseling. I mean, I am at work and at home. Nobody's really interested in hearing my input. I'm just stuffed. Even when I was a kid, my voice was stuffed. I'm not going to say, why did you create that? But I'm also not going to say, well, you should stand on a box somewhere and say, I need to be heard. I'm going to ask them to look at what's behind that and the deeper lessons involved. Then find their real voice, not the reactive voice. And now, when you find your real voice, you will be heard. You won't suffer as much with the not being heard. Because that's insensitive that people don't hear you, but sometimes they're playing off of our own insecurities about being heard, our own low self-worth. So it's important that we look at our own part in these things. But you don't flippantly throw that on somebody and say, well, why did you create, or why, that's your issue or whatever. Another one, telling people, I'm going to come back to that one because you guys brought that, a couple of you brought this one up. There's another one, we teach most what we need to learn. That's true sometimes. We also teach what we have learned. So when you are learning something, or when you're struggling with something in your personal life or work or wherever, and someone says to you, well, they say we teach what we most need to learn, so maybe you don't quite know the things you say you know. So maybe you're trying to learn them by spouting them, teaching them, preaching them, whatever. Guys, sometimes just be confident that you do know things. You're not only teaching what you need to learn, sometimes you learned it and you're a good teacher of it. Is that okay? Yeah, one of you did bring up my guides. My guides are telling me that I need to tell you something. I have a lot of responses to that one. Yeah. One of them being, why didn't my guides let me know? Or, if your guides are so powerful, why didn't they tell my guides? Or something like that. But, just being playful about it. But, people take these things so seriously. But it's you do have guides. And the guides may be telling you something. But if your guides are tuned in properly, the message that they would share is typically one of love. If it comes from anything needy, if it comes from anything you'll benefit from. If somebody says, my guides told me that I need to let you know that you're supposed to give me money, if they benefit from it, I would doubt it. I would just say, well, thank you for sharing. Here's a nickel. Now I fulfilled, your guidance. But if the person sharing the guidance is going to have personal benefit from it, financial benefit from it, I would just question that. Because there's a lot of people that do this these days. My guides are telling me, that's the wrong outfit for you. Tell your guides to mind their own business. My guides are telling me that you and I are supposed to hook up. Then go to spiritualguidehookups.com. But don't tell me about it. And I believe in the guides. I know I'm all into this. But those of you who know me know you haven't had that much success telling me what your guides want me to do.
That's right.
Sorry. It happens, a lot of times. And those are typically back to the people that I need to be heard. And they feel dissed when you don't listen to what their guides want you to do, guys. But, love. If your guides are sharing something, is it an expression of love? As soon as the word need comes in, I question it. My guide said you need to. My guide said you need to. I'm like, interesting. It's an interesting word. Now, there's a bunch of people going, note to self, don't ever say need around Michael. I got to have a different angle. I'm still on to you, man. Okay? Here's a couple more. Let me see. I wrote them in different pieces of paper from you guys. The one that God did this to me, or why is God doing this to me? When you say things like, wow, God's really putting me through a lot of tests, it isn't God. And it isn't your neighbor. And it isn't your partner. When we go through tests, whether we succeed in passing the test or stumble a little during the test, the tests are set up by our own soul. And my soul sets mine up, and my soul contributes to ours. And your soul sets your tests up and contributes to ours. My soul is co-creating with you, but it also has its own decisions. Sometimes my soul is conflicted with what your souls, plural, would want to do. And that's when we really run into challenges on earth. But the tests are coming from my soul, our souls. Our soul is saying, we're trying to get you to go home. God, heaven, oneness. And we, the soul, is saying, we can see where you're not quite aligned yet. So what we're going to do is encourage you. There's two ways it encourages, the easy way or the hard way, on how to get home. So your soul, without your realizing it, usually is saying, hello, beloved, good morning. Listen, we would like you to pay more attention and love yourself, health-wise. And we kind of wake up and Oh, I missed breakfast. I might as well pick me up a quadruple cappuccino, something or other, to dunk, junk in it and junk food in it, and so on and so on. And yet your soul is trying to say, we were telling you this morning to take better care, more self-love, and we're ignoring it. After so many days or weeks or months or years of that, the soul says, I have a different way to bring this to you. How I was saying for the last many moons, that you should take better care of yourself, more self-love, and you're really not listening? I have an idea. I know just the perfect staircase for you to tumble down and find yourself in all kinds of, pain, so that you'll end up in a hospital, so that you'll end up in physical therapy, so that you'll end up doing yoga and getting healthy again. I would rather you not have to go that route, but that's the human standard. So again, we can learn the easy way or the hard way, but it isn't God. When people say, oh, God's really testing me, all kinds of things, my life is falling apart. God's testing me. Your life, God never, ever, ever in history made someone's life fall apart. Ever. It was only ever decided by our soul. It seems like you might need the more drastic route. And that's when things fall apart. You might then go, well, that doesn't feel very good. Then that means I'm a hard-headed learner, and it's going to happen to everybody. Jesus, you, me, it's going to happen to everybody, that a few times per lifetime, a bunch of stuff's going to blow up at once. It's called the dark night of the soul. It's not the dark night of God visiting upon me. It's the dark night of the soul. Whose soul? My soul. When I'm going through the dark night of the soul, I'm going through the dark night of my soul. It's when my soul's, taking me through the relevant parts of my life and working on them. It's when the soul says, you've been talking about that relationship issue for a long time. Just note. Now, you've been talking about your health not being quite right. Just note. You've been talking about not liking that job. Just note. And it takes note of these things. And it says, I have a great idea. Instead of you having to come back again and again and again, doing only one lesson at a time, I think it'd be just brilliant if we can get you to go through everything all at the same time for a couple of years. And we're going, why does God do this? And I swear, it isn't God. It's just the natural cycles. Christians will call it something else. What are they going to call it? The devil. Man, you just go into different buildings. It's kind of cute if you think about it. You go into one building and it's Christians. They'll go, Satan's really working me over. Somebody else, go to a New Age building, they go, oh man, Saturn's retrograde in my chart. You go to another building, somebody's going to say, man, I'm working on some karma. Like, different groups have their different thoughts about it, but it's not God. Even the word Satan is doing this to me, comes from the word Saturn. Before there was a Satan, there was a Saturn. So when people say, Satan's working me over, there's actually not a pitchfork thing looking for you today. But Saturn is, meaning the natural cycles of life come around. And when we say Saturn is doing this, it isn't actually the planet. The planet's not like, oh, I can't wait to get you. The planet isn't an evil, but it represents, hi there, I'm Saturn and I'm cycling through your life. So I've brought some things you might have forgotten about as it moves through. As it waves to Mercury going retrograde the other way, for that week or month or whatever it happens to be. That's what's happening. Our soul has us involved with cycles, and they're natural. So instead of pinning it on a name, Satan, it's the Saturn cycles. And where do those cycles come from? Even they're reflecting our own lessons. My soul will say, I know approximately what time in your life you're going to need some house cleaning. So I'm going to set up some dark nights of the soul around that time. And the planets will, you're going to be born at the time the planets will cycle into reflecting that. The planets don't shift and go backwards like randomly to bring you lessons. The lessons are already staged by our soul as to which things we're going to work on at any particular time. So the planets aren't doing it to us either. They're reflecting our map. Does that make sense? All right. Another one you brought up, if it's meant to be. Another one really similar is, in divine timing. And we did a whole talk on that. I would recommend that you go back and check it out. But if it's meant to be, that's a really tricky one to be trying to talk about here. Because the meant to be, again, there's no God saying, other than our going home, there's no God saying, it's meant to be, you're supposed to divorce today or get married today. This is our soul bringing us through these cycles. When we say it's meant to be, it's our way of saying, I don't want to take responsibility. It's fate. Be careful with that. It's meant to be, or divine timing. We're dealing with all the cosmology around us and all of our psyche and all of our consciousness and all of our karmas and all these things. There's not really a meant to be per se. It's more like, how am I participating in the experience more than how am I fated to go through such and such. When someone says to you, or you begin to think, I'm not to have a relationship. I was looking for a significant partner in this lifetime. And I've had people say to me, but I guess it's not meant to be. If you're 90 and you don't have children, but are thinking you would have loved to have had one, I'm going to go with it wasn't meant to be as a blanket statement, but I wouldn't interpret it the way most people would. I would just say that's what happened. Because that's what happened means it's what ended up happening, not it was a fate given to you. And that's kind of aligned with another one of you brought up, which is you're always where you're supposed to be. There are sci-fi movies that have been made, that show like those things, those moments, and the characters walking, let's say, through a door, and then in the sci-fi movie something happens where they ended up going through a different door. You know what I'm talking about? Those kinds of movies. The universe is a multi-dimensional experience. And if you can wrap your mind around this, it's almost like saying that there is a universe for every decision you could have ever made. So, as you're sitting in this room, you're hearing whatever you're hearing, experiencing whatever you're experiencing. The thought that, if you had the thought of not coming here today or not watching today, that also is a reality somewhere. Does that make sense? So all possibilities and probabilities exist simultaneously according to quantum physics. All possibilities, and then we go, how could that be? That means that there's just an infinite number. Yes. Well, I don't like that. That's overwhelming my mind. I want to think that there's only one possibility. There's something called the Bible Code. The Bible Code, long story short, is that some people, it was originally Sir Isaac Newton, but that's a long story. Years later, when they developed computers, Newton said, I think that there's a code in the Bible that if you were to decipher it, like the way you do cryptic writings, like every so many letters, you add those words and it'll be hidden words, that sort of thing, like ciphers and all this. Well, he said, I think it's there, but he never discovered it fully. In the 70s, they started finally kind of finding some things in the Bible going, this is weird. Like they would find every so many letters, words compiled that would tell us secrets out of the Bible, the Torah and then the Bible. So then, when we developed computers and starting around the 80s and 90s, it really took off. Here's basically how it goes. They take the Bible and they enter the entire thing into a computer. Then they tell the computer to look for words not in the standard reading of the Torah this direction or our Bible this way, but in every direction like a crossword puzzle. They'll tell it, look for hidden words. Then they'll even tell it to search for specific words like Twin Towers. And it found twin towers running one direction, running the other direction, two planes. Yeah, they found that in the Bible. They started searching for all kinds of things, and it's mind-boggling. But they'll look up names of world leaders. They looked up Al Gore. Crossing it was something to the effect of, it will be stolen from him. They look up these other things and all these cryptic, it's bizarre, it's amazing. And that science is going to be able to, continue getting developed in the right hands, and so on. But they did ask this. They did ask about, I'll just kind of paraphrase, Third World War. And it actually gave Holocaust, or, some big words like that, Armageddon, and it actually showed up. And it gave the year, which is only like a dozen years ago, that it was supposed to happen. However, They look up, let's say, end of the world, and crossing end of the world is the year, let's just pretend it's the year 2000. And then crossing the year 2000 was, there are 5 options. Which one will you choose? You get what I'm saying there? How do you then say something is meant to be? There are different roads. Which one will you choose? And then they found later, looking at that same cryptic compilation, crossing which one will you choose was, you chose well. Like, then why did you even tell us there were other options? Why didn't you just say, good job, humans? They look up things like ETs, and it was connecting things that alien interactions with humanoids and this kind of thing. I mean, all kinds of trippy things they're able to look up. Even things that ended up becoming predictions that people were making from it, saying, hey, to so-and-so, watch out because this is in the Bible code that this could happen to you. So it's quite startling. But the point of all that was to say, it's not meant to be. It's laid out and there are options. And what you choose will alter the next few paths before us. Does that make sense? Thank you. So, a last one or two. There's one that's quite common and quite popular, so I'm going to go to this one that's coming to mind, which is, it's time now for the goddess and time for the divine feminine or the feminine to rule the world and to, so on and so on. Be careful with that, because as soon as you affirm it's time for one, then there's another. As soon as there's a one, there's another. So if it's true that it's now time for the feminine, it means the masculine then will come back at some point. I wouldn't want that if I were you. I wouldn't, just meaning in its imbalanced state. Don't affirm it's time for, because that means I'm in pain, I don't like what I'm seeing, so I want something to fix it. So this will fix it. And I'm saying as soon as there's a this, then there's a that, and that's dangerous. Instead, affirm right there. It's time not for the feminine or the masculine, it's time for our center. It's time for our awakening. Affirm enlightenment. Affirm not a gender winning or a race winning. We don't need races to rule, and we don't need genders to rule. So I know that one's hard for some people because they're a bit frustrated with the way life has been on earth. But finding an answer with our human minds and opinions isn't ever an answer. It's still a reaction. So instead, center. Think about how that looks. Think about how that feels. There's another one, using the word think. People will say, get out of your mind. No. They say, get into your heart, get out of your mind. Yes, get in your heart, but don't throw away your mind. Because your mind, this is a common saying, get out of your mind. Well, wait a second. What does that mean? Those are people that are trying to prove that they're just so spiritual, they don't use their head anymore, which is obvious because they said stupid things like that. But do not get out of your head. Instead, surrender your mind to God. Surrender your heart to God. Surrender your body. The people that say get out of your mind, get out of your head, don't use your head, are the same as, it's similar to people saying get away from your bodies, they're evil. It means the same thing. They're finding something, making it wrong and bad, and saying get away from it, then you'll be better. And I'm saying no. Bring God into your heart, bring it into your mind, bring it into your body. Spiritualize all parts of yourself. Don't run from any of them. Don't steer away from any of them, and so on. Is that all making sense? All right. Any that I missed? Yes?
Okay, like you say, my guide tells you, but how about if they tell you your guide is telling you?
It's the same thing, man. Yeah, so she's asking, so what if the person says, not my guides are telling me to tell you this, but your guides are telling me. Your guides are telling me what they're, you're not hearing or something. But I would just say, okay, thank you, I appreciate it. And I do. When anybody says that, I'm not rude. I sincerely mean thank you, because I will look at it. But I'm not warning that those messages are always wrong. What I'm partly saying is be careful, especially if you're one of those people, be careful not to spout stuff on other people and tell them what they should be doing. At least be tactful about it. Listen, for example, I know, there's a lady at a conference once that I was called, so to speak, and we use, and they'll say this to me too, they'll say, I don't want to say this, but I'm really being guided. So the more intently they're feeling they need to tell me something, the more they think it's true. But this woman, I was feeling this calling, man, and I did say to her, how are you doing? First start off with, hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you, whatever. A little more bridging, a little more conversation. And then when it was the right time, I kind of said, so how are you doing in your personal life? I mean, in a casual way, I said it. And they kind of stopped, and you just see all the, hi, nice to meet you, just dropped. And they said, to be honest, I was contemplating suicide. And it was like, wow. I'm so glad in that moment I felt called to be able to say, but I didn't say my guides are, I just asked how she's doing. She could then tell me. So bridge, find a way that empowers people to discover things rather than my guides. Hi, listen, my guides are telling me that you and I, are supposed to kind of get together.
I have somebody that I know that
Mm-hmm.
he is psychic, I guess, or whatever. That he says that your guide is blah blah blah, and he tells me things about myself and whatever and so on. So I mean, should I listen?
So which I said, so the person is telling you, I'm hearing your guides, then I'm supposed to tell you this or that from your guides or my guides or whomever. My guides, your guides, everywhere, guide. Wherever it's coming from, the bottom line, what I would do is, thank you. And I'll check that out. Now, if I check that out, this is what Jesus says, by the fruits, or test the spirits, he says. Even though people say Jesus is against psychics, and he never says that. But he does say test the spirits. So when they're telling you something, he says, put them to the test. So if I were in your shoes and someone saying, you need to do this and you need to do that, again, I weigh out whether there's personal interests of theirs, but also the accuracy. If they say, be careful with this, and it happens, and be careful with that, and it happens, and you might want to consider this, and it turns out to be great advice, the more I would consider that to be helpful. When it doesn't turn out, or where it's fear-based, I would probably find a tactful way to say, listen, I know that you're a psychic, because you said they claim to be a psychic. I know that you're psychic, and I think that's fantastic. Probably have helped a lot of people. I'm not finding it helpful when you share those things with me, so I'd rather you not. Tactfully, lovingly, not. If they say, oh no, I have to. My guides told me I need to. I would actually go so far as to be done with the friendship. That's what I would do. Because, you're pushing that on me and I'm not interested. All right? All right. Any others?
If you spot it, you got it.
If you spot it, you got it. That's actually true. I'll actually elaborate on that. Everything I see is reflecting something for me. I even use the word for rather than to me because it sounds more fated. Everything I see is reflecting something. All right? And it's there, right? So if you spot it, you got it. It is kind of like saying everything I perceive reflects something. But just remember, don't take it too literally. You see, if I were looking at the audience here and, somebody has a short haircut and I notice them, doesn't mean I need to go get a haircut because I'm noticing you with short hair. Don't take it too literally. But if I keep getting attracted to looking at that person with short hair, it might be representing something, whatever that is. Just like, for example, I've had somebody say to me, Michael, my guides told me you should get a haircut. And I said, well, tell your guides to mind their own business or something, No, I didn't say that, but I thought it. But that's somebody, why would your guides tell you to tell me that? They know I'm not going to do it if they're anything decent of a guide. So what good is that for you to tell me? However, I've had it happen where people, the subject of my hair, it's just hair, but when people talk about the hair, oh, your hair, and make a big deal, or nice hair, beautiful hair, whatever. I've actually then thought, topic of hair. It's strange. And then I go and cut it off. Because I looked at it as a test that I'm mirroring to test that there's not a vanity to having hair, long hair, short hair, whatever it is. So there's times when I look at these things as, just going to check on that. Clip. Okay, cool. Because now I'm not telling you guys to do that, but I like to make sure I feel clear about things. If they're coming up, I will look at it and go, that's interesting. Why several times this topic or that topic? Doesn't mean take it all too seriously, but take a look at it. I remember when I was a kid and doing, body work at times, and I remember a gal said to me, I believe that all males that do body work have agendas. So I stopped doing body work for a year or two to make sure that that wasn't the case for me. So spot it, got it, or seeing it, perceiving it, things are a mirror to us, and we are the ones, there's a great saying from a wise one, we are the dreamers of the dream. That was Willy Wonka. But we are the dreamers of the dream. And that's an amazing line, because we are. So rather than get just annoyed that things come up in our lives, I will ask you, don't too serious, but just check things out. Sit back and relax. That's how I come to understand things. When I hear people saying, it's time for the feminine, I go, wow, what is the truth behind that? Is that what we're fated? Is that where we're going? No. Center. And then someone says, my guides need to tell you. Really? Okay, well, email it to me and I'll check it out. Center. Not buying into things, not getting into fates and intensities and guilts and shames and why did you create that and being insensitive to people. And what's really disturbing is a lot of these comments that I shared today are common and people actually like them. Why did you create that? That's got to be the dumbest thing to say to a person that's in pain. Don't try to show them you're so amazing that you know some line you can throw out. Just say, I'm sorry to hear that. Hold them. God is asking you in that moment to be humane and be there, not show what you know. I know this, I truly believe, absolute conviction. This entire universe is an illusion dreamt up. And I would not tell someone who told me, I just experienced a tragedy, it's just an illusion. Because that's another flippant line. There's another one for us, Oh, it's just an illusion. Course in Miracleites, I call them. All this mega serious Course in Miracleists or ites. They're like that. It's just an illusion. It's so bizarre because they're using head stories, head statements to survive because they don't know any of the truth of anything. So they'll just say it's all an illusion. It is, but you don't understand that. And if you did, you wouldn't be throwing it out on me when I'm in pain. Because if you really understood it's an illusion, you would know how to know the truth but respect the illusion. You would know that I'm in pain right now. And if that's where I'm at, meet me at the level I'm at. Help me out. Because if it's just an illusion, you'll know how. You'll know how to navigate the illusion because you're so clear that it's an illusion. When you don't know, you're going to protect yourself and distance yourself from me by saying, too bad for you, it's an illusion. That's what they're doing. When people throw out these comments like the ones we've shared today, all of those are separatist comments. They're all statements to push you back or push people back. Why did you create that? Look at what that does energetically. Why did you create that? I'm supposed to tell you something. My guides are telling me to tell you, and on and on and on. It's all pushing away, and people don't realize it. Instead, you drop the guard and imagine saying, I'm sorry to hear that. So you join with them. Just don't believe that illusion has power over people, because that's what the illusion would like you to think. It doesn't have power, but they think it does, so hold them and help them at whatever level you can. So, yeah, and one of you brought up that idea of, I'm not gossiping, I'm just passing this along. That conversation's not going to go well. Listen, I'm not gossiping, but I'm just passing this along neutrally from God, from Spirit. It's really? How clear are you? And people don't realize they're typically not clear when they're passing along gossip. Gossip is a verbal form of murder. It is. Catherine Ponder, a great author over the years, wonderful author on prosperity and topics like this, she had this whole concept of the 10 Commandments. And she turned the words, thou shalt not kill, meant thou shalt not kill my abundance, through negative dialogue around abundance. So she turned all the 10 Commandments into a context of how our thoughts and our words are doing the breaching of the commandments, ruining our better life and our better prosperity. So the concepts of gossip is not as passive as people would like to think. They're just, it's what it is it's like an infusion of hate, but it's disguised as I'm just passing this along. I'm totally in a neutral state. It's very slim chance of that. And the only way and the only time you can ever say you're clear, if even close to being clear, is when someone has told you something, you have then looked at what it brings up in you, and from a centered place, you can choose to share it. And it would then be lovingly and tactfully. That's when you know you're at least close and righteous to say that. But if I haven't even looked at what it means to me, if this person says that something about that gal there, and I haven't looked at what it brings up, and I'm going to tell this gal about that gal, I'm off. And I need to take responsibility for that. I might even go back and say, listen, by the way, I was saying such and such about her to you or whomever, and I want to apologize. And I think that's amazing when people can do that. I've had that a few times in my life where people came up and said, I was telling you something about somebody and that wasn't really right. I just think it's amazing when people can have that level of spirit, and responsibility. You had your hand up?
What was her name? Catherine?
Ponder. Catherine Ponder, yep. Her best books are Open Your Mind to Receive and Open Your Mind to Prosperity. Those two books are the best. They're in the store here, but easily found most metaphysical stores, I think. All right? Let's have a few moments centered silence. Now, of all the things we heard today, try to breathe in the ones that made the most sense and seem the most true for you. Don't do it intellectually so much as just breathing them in like, yes, this is true. This one or that one made sense. And breathe it in like a new truth for you. So that when you leave here, you can hold that truth and bring that truth out to the world instead of perpetuating the false statements made. Take some time to appreciate any of them you heard. Which ones made the most sense for you personally? Which ones were you the most grateful to hear? Such as, there's no fate stuck on me. Or it could be, when people have told you, that's your issue. Why did you create that? Things like that. For a moment, guys, let that go because that was insensitive. And feel held. If this, as an example, is an important one to you, feel held instead of told that comment. And look at the difference. You were struggling, and someone says, why did you create that? Then change it. What if instead they said, I'm sorry to hear that? Look at the different feeling. You can feel it in your own soul, how you would be different if you said to somebody, sorry to hear that, instead of, why did you create that? It's so obvious. So my spiritual statements are going to be like what? We know what the inaccurate ones are like, and they're ever so popular. Let them go. The ones that made sense to you today, let's take a moment to integrate and adopt them as our truth. Just the ones that made the most sense to you. And just take a moment to meditate and imagine these are all your awarenesses now. I understand things don't happen by chance. I understand that even if people do somehow create things that's not what they always need to hear. I understand how it's important not to preach the time of a gender or a race being superior or running things, ruling things. Instead, I really like the idea of harmony and balance. Let's let harmony lead us. Not a man or a woman, but harmony. Let's let balance lead us. Play with these ideas for a minute. Play with them, own them, and imagine them being activated into the world and what a different world we'll have. And how are things different if you bring this into the world of other people? What if you bring these new ideas into the lives of people around you? At work, or in the grocery store, or at home? What if you implemented these kinds of statements, the new ones? Instead of, why did you create that? You might be saying to people, wow, what happened? And maybe after a while saying something like, I wonder what else is going on behind all this. Just imagine saying these kinds of things to people, the difference in their lives. Try to see on their faces and their eyes, their smiles, their responses, that they really appreciate that someone gave them a more reasonable spiritual answer instead of a flippant one. And then quietly begin giving thanks. Quietly begin integrating back into your body. But take this with you. I'd like this to not be a talk that you heard, but rather an experience. Imagine you're listening to this today, and it was actually an initiatory process where you started becoming that wisdom that is more rational, that is more beautiful and loving rather than flippant, heady answers. So we were here today and we experienced a shift in consciousness so that these higher concepts are ours. We own them. It's kind of cool. Lots of teachers, authors, preachers, well known far more than most people watching here today. And they're still flippantly throwing out those other answers, and they're not true. I'm not asking you to compete with them. I'm just asking you to appreciate that you got something different today. Deeper awareness. And it will have a much better and deeper impact on people in your lives that you answer with depth instead of the flippant surface level answers. Just gradually stretch out, please.